Hello,
Hi,
I'm Tom Lawler. I'm an actor.
hi Tom. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Come here, first of all, congratulations on your recent award. Must have been very bizarre receiving an award, on screen.
Yes, it was. Although it was kind of fun because, you know, you get, and sometimes you win an award, you go up and you stand there, and it's quite daunting. Whereas this time, it was nice to be able to be with my family. That
Yeah,
actually was really nice because you can share it more in a more immediate way. Whereas before, if another time you're kind of standing up looking at it, and it's a bit kind of dazzling, and it goes very fast. So it was nice to have my family there. That
yeah,
was what was nice. Yeah, it was
very,
good.
very much there. In fact,
I know. I was just thinking afterwards, it could have gone very differently depending on the mood my son was in. He may make an appearance later on. He's upstairs, so
that's all
yeah,
good.
he's you know.
Tom, come here. Well, looking back now on Tom Vaughan-Lawor as a child, do you think you were always destined to become an actor? Was that from a very early age for you?
Well, no, my dad's an actor, so I grew up in theaters and backstages and wings and auditoria, and I did plays as a kid, and I found the world of theatre at a young age very intense, and I didn't that thing of like doing a tech in the day in the dark and then coming out into the light, even that I found very intense. And I did a production of Waiting for Godot, followed by a production of One for the Road by Pinter, and both of those kind of put me off acting and theatre because both those plays they deal with such huge adult themes. Um, the one hand, the Pinter dealing with dictators and political psychological torture, and then obviously Godot, this existentialist, this beautiful existentialist play. I didn't. There were huge adult themes that I knew were massive that I didn't understand, but terrified me. And so I just said I don't want to be part of that world. So I stopped acting when I was in my teens, and then I came around to it again when I was at university,
Okay.
and I was exposed to it all over again. And one of my formative experiences was seeing Eileen Walsh and Killian Murphy do Disco Pigs, and that really changed my mind about acting. I remember going to see that production. We were told to go and see it by a tutor at Trinity, and it was there. They were, I think, it was in some tiny theatre off maybe Henry Street or something.
Mm.
And I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what the play was. I'd never heard of these people. And I was like, oh, right, okay, we'll go along. I sat there, and it just, like, the pair of them and that play, they just come out kind of punch drunk by their presence, their talent, the writing, theatre, just a buzz with kind of going, fuck me. Like, just, it was I'll never forget it. It was an astonishing moment.
Yeah,
So that really blew my head and blew my mind.
it's gas actually that kind of for all of us that was around kind of around that time that
Yeah,
that comes up an awful lot as a
I'm
touch.
sure. I'm sure.
And come here, before that, I mean, when you say you kind of fell out of love or kind of went away from it, was there a different career path in your head, Tom? Was there kind of something else that you were?
Um, Not really. I was just kind of drifting through school trying to figure out who the hell you are. I liked music, I liked writing, but I'd no idea what I wanted to be, really. Um, and 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 I suppose my dad's a big film fan, so I was always watching films with him, old films, and so I was always exposed to great acting all the time, and exposed to culture in our house. Culture was a big thing, and so I was always leaning that way. But yeah, it was kind of the last thing I wanted to be because I saw this how intense an actor's life is, and trying to raise kids as an actor, as a self-employed artist. Is You go, oh, I don't, I that's just the uncertainty. As a teenager watching that, I go, I don't want that, and here I am. And so but you, when you're exposed to that as a kid, you realize what art is and culture and the importance of it. And now I'm so thankful that I went that way.
It's fascinating. I mean, like that you must have been playing in Pinter and Becky then at a very young age.
Yeah, like 9 and 10, I think. I know it's so funny. I was in the famous Gate production of Waiting for Godot that Walter Asmus directed. I was like the alternate boy. They had a main boy to play the boy, and then I was kind of like the alternate. So I got about 3 or 4 performances, and I just remember like all his yes nos and yes nos. I just was going, if I say yes or the wrong no, this play is over. You know, I was so terrified. I was with Tom Hickey, and he was so brilliant, and it was an extraordinary experience. But again, I knew I had some concept that this play was this iconic, massive moment in playwriting, and the themes it was dealing with was something monumental and existential and universal, and it frightened the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It really did. And so that was quite shocking, but formative as well.
And did you still remember kind of that feeling of being on stage at that age, kind of in that play? Is that something that stays with you?
Yeah, I think so, because it was so, I knew the material was very special and very, very important, and I can still remember my blocking very simply: just walk on, stand still in this kind of white gown or this kind of white shirt and these kind of shorts, and just speak to Tom Hickey, and then kind of walk. And again, my other fear was knocking over the set, because I had to walk backwards the way I'd come, and just thought I might, if I knocked over the set, and just being terrified.
Yeah.
But as I say, also it's a moment I'll never forget, and yeah, it was very special.
And then in college, you went into Trinity, wasn't it, and did drama and theatre studies?
I did it. Yes, I did. I did drama and classics.
Okay.
And and it was it's an academic course with some degree of practical, and it was also formative, obviously, and helped me, I think, in terms of researching plays and interpreting plays. And there's that thing, I suppose, for actors going, you don't want to be too cerebral and you don't want to be too academic, but at the same time, I did some brilliant courses there that really, I think, helped me understand plays and interpret and try and find the keys to characters. So I found it amazing. And just being exposed to academia and learning, and also just being in seminars with other students whose ability to interpret plays and books just kind of blows your mind.
Yeah.
And kind of the endless richness of culture and art, and such an exciting place, seeing young people. And it's also that thing about age. We had like several mature students in our year who were always down the front, always hungry for the knowledge. We were always going, who are those squares? And now you're like, now you get it. Now you're going, oh, you don't, you know, when you're young, you're like, I want to go out, I want to do a bit of this, I want to read, and then you get older and you go, oh, I get it now. It's about time and knowledge and learning and regret and other paths, and so now I get it. But at the time I was like, why are they always asking questions? It's like, but it was an amazing time. So I learned a hell of a lot. But academia is also quite terrifying, right? It's such a huge world and its own kind of culture. But I learned a hell of a lot there, and I kind of I can't believe I have a degree. You know, I can't believe I actually passed my exams. And so yeah, it was.
Did you get involved in players at the time? Did you be acting at all?
I did bits and pieces, and there were people who were there all the time. I found it also very, very exposing and frightening. And like, what's amazing about drama societies is the bravery of the undertaking. Some like taking on the most, expressionistic pieces and doing crazy mad stuff with it, and just being and just amazing work, and amazing actors and writers and directors who are not in the business anymore, or not artists now, but were total artists and totally brilliant. But I found it very frightening at that time in my life. I was only 18, going to university. I found it very exposing, and I didn't really. It took me a while to kind of go into that, and only because you had to do it for your drama degree that you had to perform. I wouldn't have done it other than that, because you had to perform. Whereas my interest was more in playwriting or theatre history, or it wasn't really in performing, but because we had to perform as part of our degree, that's why I started to make steps that way.
And how did you find yourself then going to RADA? Like, how was kind of, what was the steps to that?
I throughout my 4 years at Trinity, over the course of time, acting became more and more important to me as I started to kind of dabble in it. And I found the idea of saying I wanted to be an actor quite a hard thing to say, because it's serious. And to say I am an actor is a serious statement, I think, because it's a commitment to a life and a craft and an art that's really fucking serious. And I'm reading about acting practitioners and teachers and the work that it's involved. So I increasingly began to understand and have more of a respect for an appreciation of the skill and the craft, and being exposed to great actors on stage in Dublin and in the theatre festivals, and they'd come, just seeing top actors and top professionals and going, this is like, and being gladiators and being able to kind of repeat that night after night for months. It terrified me and attracted me, and I thought, okay, I want to go for it. So then I applied to drama schools in England. But again, the idea of moving to England terrified me. But I knew I had to kind of go away to train, because I felt like I'd been in Dublin, and Dublin felt small to me. Not small creatively, but small in terms of people knowing you. So I remember my first week at RADA, we were in Russell Square chasing leaves around this park in this movement class. And I knew I couldn't have done that in Dublin and Stephen's Green, because I would have died of embarrassment, or if someone had seen me, I would have been so embarrassed. But being in London, I didn't know anyone. I could reinvent myself. I could cut loose. And so I was able to go away and be anonymous and kind of start again.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, that was the start for me.
And like, it's funny, because you look at your career, you know, on stage and film, and particularly on stage, like the classics have played a big part, you know, the kind of modern classics and that, you know, but also you mentioned there that kind of academic side. Has that kind of research or kind of, you know, intellectual cerebral piece stayed with you, Tom, kind of in relation to the way you approach work, or has it changed?
I think we had an amazing acting teacher at RADA who was all about getting out of your head and trusting instinct and being less cerebral and less kind of academic about things. And sometimes if your setting is that way after 4 years of university, it can take a shift. But thankfully I wasn't a very good academic, so, you know, it didn't take that much of a jump. But I know other people who went to drama school who were brilliantly academic, who found that change. People who got there, but it took slightly longer. But I was able to kind of make the change. And so you just have to be careful, I think, when you're in a rehearsal room, that you don't make academic choices. And so you can balance your kind of a reading of a play or interpretation of a play cerebrally with something totally instinctive. But that also can take time to shed those instincts. But I've worked with amazing directors and amazing teachers who've kind of beaten that out of me. So I'm lucky.
And come here, the sense then, I mean, you know, you mentioned there kind of, you know, moving to London, and then obviously the newness of kind of going to RADA, which for anyone can be kind of daunting. But, you know, that sense, when you kind of found your feet there, and over the course of your studies in RADA, were there moments where you kind of, you know, it's always that daunting thing of like, you know, you're finished college and then you're out into the world. Was there an awareness of that for you kind of before you left, or was that a big shock for you when it kind of finished?
Well, going from university to drama school, like no joke, I had the runs for like 3 months when I started drama school, because it's that kind of cliche thing of like breaking you down and building you back up, but they really put you through the ringer emotionally. At RADA, they were going, you know, you are your instrument, and so we're going to strip away all of your kind of your bullshit, I suppose, and your affectations and your personas to kind of drill down into something truthful. But I was lucky to have been at university. If I'd done that when I was 18, I would have sunk. Like I wouldn't, because I didn't know who I was. I mean, I'm not saying I knew I was any closer to knowing who I was when after university, but I had a certain degree of, I just had a greater sense of self. But I even then, even after having those 4 years, it was still so hard to just be kind of like art. My teacher was all about, acting isn't about putting a mask on, it's about taking a mask off, and about kind of always about self-revelation. But that's a hard thing to do when you're a young person, right? And so the first few months were really, really hard. And you're away from home and you're homesick and you're living in a culture and a city that you don't know. And so it was a huge kind of a huge shock to my system, hence the diarrhea. And so I was in a really, it was like being punched every day, but it was also, you realize you were being tested every single day, stretched everything. And you were there like from, 8 o'clock in the morning till like 8 o'clock at night. Every day you're being asked to do different writers, different forms of theater, different styles of performance, learning about different parts of the craft. And so it was like it was amazing. And you kind of missed, I think, when you're at the industry and you start to become more pigeonholed or typecast, or you're narrowed, you kind of miss that. And you have to remind yourself that you've got to make choices that challenge you, expand you, that you don't narrow your choices and you don't narrow your path and your artistic taste, that you try other things. So I've been lucky in my career to be able to do those things.
Yeah. And then when you emerged, Tom, I mean, like, it's funny because like you look back on your stage career and it's kind of straddled both sides of the water, a lot over the last 16, 17 years. But when you came out, like, what was the kind of the first months like for you? What was the kind of the?
Well, I was lucky to have a job to go to when I left drama school. I started with Druid in 2000. So I had a job to go to straight out of drama school, which again was a lucky bridge into the profession. And that was a whole other kind of, you're trained to be a professional and you're treated as a professional at drama school, but you're with your peers and you're with other students.
Yeah.
And then you go into an environment where you're dealing with pros who've been in the business like decades. And so it's a huge shock again to the system, where but again, learning from the pros, learning from all pros, because when you're a student, everything's kind of tunnel vision, and everything's like your whole life is geared around your craft and your commitment. And then you come in and you see these guys who've been at it for years, who can just no less committed, but have the skill and the experience and the economy to just be able to go on stage, deliver astonishing performances, and go home and compartmentalize. Whereas you're like chewing over everything you do and you don't do, and you're tearing your hair out and you're lacerating yourself about things you haven't done or choices you should have made. And so it's great to kind of to meet older actors who have all that skill and you can learn from. So that was a shock to the system, but it was also a great gift.
Yeah. And in the first couple of years then, I mean, again, you went kind of back and forth, but you were kind of, there were big parts you were taking on very, very early.
Yeah. And this was the arrogance of youth. Like, it's that thing of the self-doubt and the ego at the same time going, I can do this, I'll take it all. And then also part of you going, am I good enough? Am I worthy? Am I able? So I suppose because I went to RADA and they trained you to be a thoroughbred.
Yeah.
They really train you to come out and be a thoroughbred. I was able to handle that technically. And also it's that thing of going, you're only given so many opportunities that you have to make the most of.
Yeah.
And you don't get a second chance in some cases. So I gave myself over to it, and I worked very hard, and I know I was always of the opinion that, you know, don't come off stage with any regrets, don't finish a job with any regrets, don't finish a rehearsal with any regrets. You know, things don't work out, sometimes they do, but if it's because of your lack of commitment or your lack of work ethic, then it's on you, right? It's your fault. So I knew I'd always come away and say, well, I gave everything I could. Sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes it does. So again, that work ethic from drama school really fed into, it's informed everything I've done, but especially in those early jobs, I know I could have that as a fallback.
Yeah, I mean, it's gas because you look at it now and you're kind of going, you know, between the course of kind of 2 or 3 years, you were playing Christy Mann, you know, in the Abbey, you were playing George in translations, you know, so, and that people, I suppose, even, you know, as a young actor, to be performing on both national stages within the space of a year in roles that are kind of, you know, synonymous with the plays must have been a buzz.
Yeah, it was amazing. And also getting to meet someone like Friel, getting to work with top directors and tour. We toured Ireland, we toured America, we toured England, in London. And like that in itself, again, is the kind of romance of being a traveling actor was also glorious and and formative, and you're learning on the job, and you're learning. But I suppose that's the thing as well, when you go from another big shock to the system are long runs, right? So you're doing runs where it's like at drama school, it's like a week of a play, and then you're into things like going for 4 months, and that again, it's about the discipline of learning that, and looking at older actors who know about economy and who know about pace and who know about the discipline of going, we're in this for a long. Well, I was doing a play a few years ago, and I still do it. I was doing a play a few years ago, and I did this thing, this kind of where I kind of threw myself and slid across the stage. And I was working with Zoe Wanamaker, who's such an amazing woman, and she was looking at me in rehearsal going, "Are you sure about that? You sure about that choice?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "We're doing this for 4 months. Are you sure about that choice?" And I was like, "Yeah." And about like 2 weeks into the run, I was like, oh, I was like, Zoe, I might change that blocking a little bit. Is that okay? She goes, "Yeah, I told you." So, you know, you're learning all the time, and I think that's it's that thing Stella Adler said about, you know, the actor who doesn't grow is a hack. That you've got to keep learning, you've got to keep growing, and that's why working with different people, young young talent who are bringing fresh energy into the industry, learning from them, not, you know, really learning and being open to that is part of hopefully being an interesting artist, I think.
And then, you know, in film, kind of, you know, in relation to your very early kind of work, you know, we work on The Tiger's Tail, and a couple of other features around that time. And yeah. I mean, obviously, in recent years, you've kind of done both hugely. Like back, say, to the first 5, 6, 7 years of your career, was predominantly theatre. But did you find that at that young age, or younger acting age, that kind of a huge jump to be on a film set from being on stage?
Yeah, massively. And here's the thing, you know, it's that thing where I don't think the public, not, like, people watch film and TV all day, every day. I think the general public, think they understand the life of an actor, experience of an actor, or, you know, people go look at theatre actors and go, why don't they just do those movies? Why don't they do? But people don't realize that, you know, astonishing, brilliant theatre actors just don't get the same opportunities in film and TV. Not because they don't want to, but because they're just not given the choice, or they haven't been given the experience at a younger age. So I did theatre for 5 years when I left drama school, not because of it was a choice, just because I didn't get any opportunities in film and TV, and I was lucky to get film and TV opportunities then slightly later, and then I've been able to kind of mix and match the both. So those early, like, you haven't a clue. I hadn't a clue what I was doing on a film set. I didn't know where to go, what to do, how it worked. And it's a totally different discipline, a totally different way of working than obviously in the theatre. And so again, it's about learning on the job and learning the etiquette of a film set, and again about economy and how to build a performance and shooting out of sequence. It's a real discipline and a real skill, just the execution of a screen performance. That's totally different from film or from theater. So I learned on the job from great people. Again, top actors, and you're kind of going like my first film was with Maggie Smith and Judy Walters and James Cromwell and Anne Hathaway and James McAvoy. And again, watching those guys who are just such brilliant actors, and their skill and their discipline and their screen craft. You know, to be exposed to that every day, you go, okay, I can use that, I can see that, I can see what they're doing there. But that takes time, I think.
And then yourself and Jimmy Fay got up to a bit of fun over the course of a few years in the Abbey. Some amazing, I mean, like, you know, and hugely varied work, you know, from Saved, excuse me, to the Irresistible Rise of Arturo E. But they were great. I mean, there was a kind of time there where there was an awful lot of people really cooking.
Oh, it was an amazing time at the Abbey. You know, it was a really exciting time, and it was brilliant to be in that building. And yeah, me and Jimmy did 3 shows kind of almost back to back, and I love working with him. And he's a really sweet, smart guy. And so it was varied work, and it was challenging and strange, and in particular the Edward Bond and the Brecht.
Yeah,
they were both challenging pieces in different ways, but both those playwrights especially, they're just so incredible, and being in their world and being in their heads. And we had Edward Bond in rehearsals and at previews, and that was a huge moment. And his kind of legacy and his history. He hadn't given the English language rights to that play since 1984 at the Royal Court, with Gary Oldman and Danny Boyle had done it at the Royal Court in '84, I think. And Jimmy went to him and asked for the rights to Saved, and he said, they've all sat there and asked for Saved, why should I give it to you? And Jimmy sat there on his couch for 4 hours with his thoughts and his ideas. At the end, Edward said, okay. And so it was like, we did 2 weeks, then Edward came over to rehearsals and watched the run and gave notes and was in the rehearsal room directing and helping us. And it was fucking mind-blowing. And it's still one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. His notes were just astonishing. These kind of poetic, but at the same time workable notes that were just astonishing. And he was, I remember him talking about the famous scene where they're stoning the baby. And he was saying to the guy, said, look, you know, they're not stoning the baby, they're stoning themselves, but there's not enough stones in the universe for that. Wow. I'm just kind of going, like, just amazing. And he was standing by the pram, they had the pram, the guy's standing. I was like, someone take a picture. This is like theater, this is proper theater history. And it's so funny, he came to some previews, and he came towards the last night. And we were all on stage at the curtain call, and we said, did the applause, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, we have Edward Bond in the audience. We'd like to invite him up on the stage to take a bow. And he got up and looked furious. I thought he was leaving. And he got up on stage and he took a bow, and he came off stage and he punched me really hard in the arm, like really hard. And he was really fucking serious. He said, don't ever do that again. Like, he was dead serious. Like, he's such an interesting man. He's such an interesting man. And like all of his plays, his collected plays on Methuen, they all have different forms of fire. The image is all fire, but different. And I said to him, why fire? And he said, I don't know, they just picked that. But it's a real apt icon image for his work. It's just like he's on fire all the time. He's anti-establishment. He's anti-commercialism. He's a total pure artist, and it was one of the best experiences of my life.
I just have that must have been a slightly terrifying moment when you saw his face when he when
when he came. You know, he came. He's famous for being tough, and he saw a run through early on, and he gave us a bit of a bollocking about lines. He's like, these are important lines. This play is a huge moment in theatre history. It's a huge moment in theatre history. And he after the run through, he came up to me and he said, I was wearing like a Celtic hat for some reason, just as my own stuff, and I was wearing a t-shirt. And he came up and he said, he saw the run through, and I was playing Len, the main character, and he's called Len. He said to me, he's called Len because it's short for lens, because everything filters through him. And he came up to me and said, I don't like your hat and I don't like your shirt, but you play him not as a member of the gang, not as an outsider, but as a member of the gang. And for that I'm relieved. And then he walked away, and I just was like, I think that's a compliment. And I was just really relieved that he didn't tear me apart. But those, again, like working with Friel, you're just like these gods, these guys who just write these plays. And because TV and film are so huge at the moment, and because theatre is the way it is at the moment, the world the way it is, you have to remember theatre, they're fucking unbelievable. They're proper works of art that you just take down a play and read an Ibsen play, or Chekhov, or a Sarah Kane play, or a Carol Churchill play, and you go, the artistry and the craft and the depth and the genius and I remember being a younger actor and kind of being very dismissive of plays. I mean, not plays, but going to see a production going, doesn't work, rubbish, crap, or genius, blah, blah, blah. These guys. But then when you go and you're a bit more mature, or you're a bit more experienced, you go, a play might not work, but it may have moments of brilliance, or promise, or performances that work, or design that has merit, or direction that is brilliant. And I'm rambling, but I just plays and theatre are when theatre is good, nothing can touch it as an art form. I don't think.
And it's got, because like at that stage of your career, you kind of had, there was a parallel thing going on for you, as I said, in the UK and in Ireland. I mean, you go from kind of playing, Arturo, that kind of Italian American, Don, to the rivals in the Abbey, to Gar Private, and then Frank Sweeney over in the UK. That's a great sort of, you're talking about compartmentalization, but that's an incredible array of people.
Yeah, and again, it's I was very fortunate to have those experiences and to have that to be able to have that range of character to play. And again, it's about stretching yourself as an actor. I think all the time it's about stretching yourself as an actor. And it's funny, I'd done Philadelphia Here I Come at the Gaiety, which was not a good production for lots of reasons, and I felt a terrible sense of shame around it. But Friel, we did an amazing read-through, right? And Friel was at the read-through, and you could see how excited he was by the read-through. And I could see him looking around, he's going, this could be something special. The read-through was amazing. The first night, for lots of reasons, the production didn't work out. And I saw him in the bar afterwards, and he was so sweet to me and so gentle. And I felt terrible shame and embarrassment and responsibility that I failed him. I felt it was a really crushing moment, and I sunk home and I felt shit about myself for a long time. Later that year, Selena Cartman was directing production of Molly Sweeney in Leicester at the Curve, and it was a Friel festival with Frank's Molly Sweeney in translations, and an actor dropped out. His dad passed away, so I did step in with like 4 days' notice.
Wow.
so I had to learn the first. I feel so I could learn the first act and carry the book for the second act. So I learned the part. I learned the part, and so my head was a total mess. And I had to call for in the final dress rehearsal. I had to call for lines like about 10 times, and I was like, I was like, I had to talk to myself afterwards, going, you know, if I'm not an actor, I'm getting on a plane and going, or train, and I'm going home. Are you an actor? You're just going to go and do it. So I did it, and it was, we got through it, survived, and Friel came, and I knew he was in the audience, and it was a kind of, I can't believe I've let Friel down twice in 1 year, like in several months, and he was in the bar afterwards, and I came down, and I felt again, I suppose, this responsibility, these kind of gods, and I came down, and he was so like beautiful to me. He said, "Thank you so much for stepping in, and thank you so much for helping." And I just really wanted to cry. I felt loads of things, and again, just being in his presence, this guy who's written faith theatre and translations, and Dancing Lunasa,
Yeah.
this hero, and you're like, wow, those moments are special.
And then, you know, you kind of actually was on TV, or was on Summer recently. I saw the production of All My Sons. That was
Yeah.
on during the lockdown.
Oh, right.
But a beautiful, beautiful production. I mean, and again,
Yeah.
a great play, and you know, a very delicate piece of work in a lot of ways that has to be done, you know, on point. But I think that production I mean, the cast was phenomenal.
Amazing. And it was directed by Howard Davies, who I worked with. I worked with on that, and then I worked with 3 times after that, and he very sadly passed away in 2016. An amazing, amazing director who was all about the play and the writer, and was without ego as a director. His plays, his productions were just so beautiful. But that, again, that play, this kind of Greek tragedy, essentially, it's set in 50s America. But I, I, I was interested. I worked with David Suchet on that, and what I learned from him was economy, um, and relaxation. It was amazing to be with him in the wings before starting that. He's about to start this huge part, this huge evening's work. It was a massive emotional journey to go over. We did it for like 6 months.
Wow.
Seeing his calmness and his relaxation and his ability to just be open, really, I really learned from that, because as a younger actor, I found I was locking a lot. Because I was being very intense about everything, I was kind of locking myself. And I just learned from him the ability to actually just be open and be relaxed and be free and be calm and be open to whatever happens. And that was astonishing, an astonishing lesson to learn. And I got a terrible bout of stage fright for a week in the middle of that show. Just out of nowhere, I had a week where I felt terrified going on stage. And it was literally from the Monday to the Saturday, and then it was over. It was a very strange moment of stage. It's the only time I've had stage fright so far in my life, and it was terrifying, terrifying. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it went, but it went, thankfully. And
yeah, never think about it again. It's gone. But I think it's interesting because I mean, in case this is found on the internet in a couple of years, we're talking now kind of in the November of COVID, but the fact that like and that was seen on the screen, I think what was very interesting about it was for being the Greek play, and it's kind of like we'll talk about it in a minute, because I saw you in the birthday party recently, a couple of years ago in it, and those kind of epic domestic plays. Like all My Sons really worked as a film play because there was a preciseness in the performances. You know, it was kind of its domesticity, I think, carried it on screen.
yes.
And I suppose leading on from that, you know, your life in some ways in Ireland was about to change radically over the course of the next couple of years, when a small little part called Nidge kind of came a calling for you.
Yes.
And I'm fascinated that, you know, in the public eye, you know, for the non-theatre going public, they wouldn't have had a comprehension of who you were, you know, because your work to that date was predominantly in theatre on both sides of the water. But I mean, did that? I know the series was a slow burner in relation to your own character, but I'd say that must have really been like a mental journey over that 5 years.
Yes, yeah, yes, and mental, personally, and professionally. But again, it's funny. I, we'd done a series before I'd done All My Sons. We'd done the first series. We were going back to the second series after All My Sons, and I was trying to figure out. I'd never. Well, it was one of my first screen jobs anyway. So I was trying to think, how do you come back to a part you've played before? How do you work on a recurring character? And so David Suchet, Mr. Poirot himself, was there. So I said I must ask him, what do you do? And I said, look, I find it very hard to watch myself on screen. How do I look back at my work and have continuity? He goes, that's your ego. Look, you've got to watch yourself on screen to know what works and what doesn't work. He said, I'll always watch back previous Poirots to see if that works, that doesn't work. I'll keep that, I'll lose that. And so that was a real getting that from him as well. I was like, okay, I can do that. So I was able to kind of chart, along with obviously Stuart's brilliant writing, I was able to chart a consistent character and that journey through, I suppose, looking back and refining. But Stuart Carroll's ability to write for his actors as well is astonishing. And so I was able to do that. But yeah, it was bonkers. I think what was even more bonkers about it was that I live in England and I was living in England at the time, and so I would have kind of anonymity here,
Yeah.
and then total bedlam when you go home. So it was literally a case of getting off a plane and just, but I couldn't have handled that if I was younger.
Yeah.
There's no way I could handle that as that kind of attention, because even as it makes you feel self-conscious, and it makes you feel kind of very self-aware, and which is what you don't want as an actor, right? You've got to be the opposite. So you're dealing with that as well, and your own privacy and how much you give of yourself, but look, it was an amazing journey, and within that show, I was also able to do theatre, worked with Mark Rowe a lot,
Yeah.
and that was that relationship has been very important to me. So I was able to mix and match theatre and film and TV.
But I think what was brilliant, and it still stands to this day. I mean, I think what the whole love hate thing was an extraordinary kind of zeitgeisty moment in Irish cultural time, but it was also very, very good. So beyond the kind of zeitgeist and the cultural piece, there's a work of kind of quality there. And I think for Nidge, I just found him fascinating in relation to this warmth that he was desperately trying to hide. Do you know what I mean? That warmth that was his vulnerability. I just love yourself and Denise McCormick and kind of that relationship and the hardening of him as it went on. I thought that was brilliantly played.
Yeah, and crafted by Stuart and I suppose if you make someone a monster straight out, you've got nowhere to go, right? And so it's that gradually leaching away of humanity. And so that rise is interesting. Is interesting to play. Here's my son. What do we do? Yes. And that charting that rise is interesting to play. And again, having a recurring character over several years and coming back to it and learning more and knowing more about him is one of the great joys of playing a recurring part in TV that you don't get on stage or in film.
I mean, but therefore it must have been nice being able to return back to London and kind of have the calmness of when I say calmness, there was a time, around that time you mentioned Margaret Rowe, the in Dublin with Our Few and Evil Days, an extraordinary piece of writing, and I think actually a play that's not spoken about enough. I think that there was a moment that was a really, really extraordinary piece, and then you took on the behemoth of Howie and the Rookie. That was
we did Howie the Rookie first and then it was funny. We did Howie the Rookie, and And I remember I was like, who am I going to play? And I was talking with Anne Clark about it and via email. No one had said who I was going to play. I was like, which one am I going to play? And I was like, do I have a preference or not? And then I remember being on the couch and getting an email saying, oh, they want you to play both. And I was like, oh, and you just go, yeah. And I was like, okay. And so I met Mark in London and we spoke about it. This is my son again. What do in a minute, darling, in a minute.
Tell him I'm not going to keep you much longer. We're nearly there.
Okay, you go watch it. Go watch it. Passing it. That's in there.
There he is, the famous man.
There he is. And so I we did Howie the Rookie at the project, and you go, is it going to work? Is the idea going to work? And thankfully it did. And we did Howie the Rookie and the project around Dublin, around Ireland, and then we were at the Edinburgh Festival. That's 2013. And then I think maybe later that year, I met Mark for a cup of tea in town. And he said, do you want to do, I've written a play. There's a part you might like. Do you want to do it? I was like, yeah. And he gave it to me. It was so funny, his physicality in giving it to me, I think. I'll say this to him. He kind of just handed it to me. And I was like, thanks. And I went home and read it in like one sitting. And it just blew my mind. I called him, so I'm definitely doing this. Thank you. And it's an extraordinary play.
Yeah.
It's an it should have it should have had and should still have a life. I just think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And his kind of skip. But what was so funny was, you know, in the first few previews, because you know what, that's the excitement of a new play, right? You don't know what it is. And so in the first few previews, the first few scenes, the audience were on the floor laughing.
Yeah.
And the first preview, we went backstage like, we're doing a drama. What are they laughing at? Like, we're being serious. And they were like killing themselves laughing. And so we were like, oh, what are we going to do? And then the play worked its magic. And then by the end, it's this like dark tragedy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose, and from that, you know, it's actually, I've kind of skipped over in my head, but you kind of, you're playing these dark, dramatic, funny characters, and within that time, you know, PJ Mara, you know, is there, and geez, I mean, that's a brilliant portrayal, Tom. I mean, and again, the kind of the Iago kind of qualities were you know, was that fun to do?
Massively fun, and also I didn't really know enough about the time. I didn't know a lot about that time in Irish history, and so to be able to research that and to be with Aidan again, and it was extraordinary. And I met him, you know, before we shot. I asked if I could meet him, and he was very sweet. And I said to him, do you mind? I have some questions. If you don't want to answer, it's fine. You go like, I don't give a fuck. Ask whatever you want. So he was like so open and lovely and interesting and like what a charismatic man. Like so astonishing. A performer, an artist in his own right, and so meeting him was pretty incredible.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of years of a lot of movies. You know,
yes.
There was, you know, The Infiltrator, which is due to come out soon, isn't it? Was that before Bryan Cranston?
Yeah, that came out a few years ago.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm confusing myself. Sorry, there was Secret Agent, Daphne, and Maze, which again was. I mean, Maze was very an interesting film because it was about obviously the maze, and it was about that time, but it was also a thriller in its own right, like an escape. Yeah. You know, and that was. Yeah.
Well, it's clever because it works as a drama and for the same time, and that's why Stephen Burke, who wrote it and directed it, it's really smart. It's a drama disguised as a thriller, really, you know, and that's smart about it. And but again, what's great about a job like that is that I had several months to prepare, so I could just do all the reading around the subject that I wanted. So to be able to have that time frame to just read and meet people and watch documentaries. I love that research part of being an actor is really enjoyable. I love it.
And did you enjoy the fact as well? I mean, obviously, Lidge would have opened doors in relation to different roles and parts in on screen and stuff. But did you enjoy spending that kind of elongated amount of time on sets? And I mean, obviously there was plays in between, but the majority of that few years, like say from the mid-teens,
Yeah. But then you kind of miss plays and you miss theatre and you look at your friends doing great plays and you kind of envy them and you go and you know, filming can be busy and can be sometimes unsatisfying unless you're playing lead parts. When it's more supporting roles, then that busyness can also be frustrating and you go, I should be in the theatre, I should be doing great plays.
Yeah.
And so you and then maybe from the theatre going, I wish I was doing film TV. So it's the constant kind of battle. But I as I say, I've been able to mix and match. So, but that's good fortune as well as anything else and opportunity.
And you get to, and you mentioned before, but getting to go back and work with Howard Davies again in Found Stars, playing Kobe as well.
Yes, and it's funny doing that play, doing a Casey in London, to doing it because I did June of the Paycock that Howard directed as well with Kieran Hines and Sinead Cusack.
Yeah,
and co-production between the Abbey and the National London. So we got to do Juno in Dublin and Juno in London, and it was so funny.
really?
Like just the difference. It's just like party time in Dublin because it's such a famous play and because it's set in Dublin, but just the knowledge of the audience, obviously of that time and of that writer, but the energy of them doing that play, like people saying the lines with you, just their appetite for that play, and then go to London where understandably they don't have the same kind of history and the same understanding. They're slightly more, they're viewing it slightly from a distance, and so it's a totally different experience doing that. And same with the Plan Stars, but again, writers and Casey's brilliance is operatic. Like something domestic like Juno, and something operatic like Clown Stars. See his journey as an artist was astonishing, and again just doing a hometown playwright abroad is also a lovely thing.
Yeah.
Feel like you're representing your hometown.
And also around, I mean, I mentioned Mara, but like around that time and around the time of the centenary, you've had the great honors, the wrong word in a way, but you've played these historical figures, like Hugh Lane, and then in the trial of the century, the brilliant the Pierce, and that must have been fascinating to be in that moment of history and kind of exploring those roles.
Yeah. And again, you're given an opportunity to understand your history and to learn about those times. And as I was trained as an actor, you've got to understand everything in terms of the cultural, social, political history of the parts. And so that feeds you as an artist. But I playing a real person is a huge responsibility. And also to find balance between, you can't do an impersonation because it's two-dimensional. So you're trying to go for a taste of something and something that's more interpreted. And so that balance is always at play. It's not easy.
Yeah. And then my sons were thrilled when they heard I was talking to you, predominantly because of Ebony Maw. Like that must have been something else, Tom, to kind of, to suddenly end up in these two, monsters.
Astonishing. The biggest budget I'd done before was like $25 million film, and then the combined budget of those was like $1 billion. And it's just mind blowing, and just being on those sets and seeing those spaceship designs and being on those spaceships and in those on the kind of locations. It's just like boyhood dream stuff. But also surreal because you're working with international superstars who you're working with, and you're opposite them in a scene, and you're trying not to be starstruck. Because at least if you're not an actor, you can be starstruck, you don't have to make an apology for it. But when you're in a scene, you're supposed to be professional and not be like going, like trying not to be starstruck. It's so, you're trying to play it cool and trying to be like, no, I'm just an actor like you are, Robert Downey Jr. And all the time you're like trying to be really kind of relaxed. And so that is its own kind of mind warp. But again, it's interesting to work with actors at that level of international fame, where you just realize they're actors like anyone else, searching for keys to characters, searching for integrity, searching for truth in the scene. So they treat you as an actor in the scene. You are an actor. It's that all that other stuff you got to let go.
Yeah.
And they do. Those guys do, and they were so welcoming to me and so warm and inviting. So I was lucky as well.
And I suppose what's always fascinating, kind of in looking kind of behind the scenes or looking at the the DVDs kind of those movies, is the CGI or the because you had some serious powers, I think
No, so much fun. But like getting to research that part is like you just have to watch the entire Marvel back catalog. Or I've got loads of like comics up there on my bookshelf. That was just like months of research, just reading comics, watching Marvel films. It was so much fun to come away from something like social history, which is fun in its own right, interesting, but also again to mix and match something that's like fun you can watch with your kids.
Yeah, so moving from playing Corey Pierce to playing Ebony Maw.
Exactly. So you're trying to juggle the two. Mark, 1 second. Sorry.
Fine.
Yes.
I could be. I mean, and then obviously to do the second one as well. To be kind of to go back, and it's not just to be one movie. It was to be the double header. To be the
Yeah, they killed me in 2 films, and I'm hoping they kill me in a few more.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah.
But but people have a huge attachment to that. I liked those films before. It wasn't something I'd go out of my way to see, but I always enjoyed them. But you realize that the importance of those films and that culture to people, like on a deep level.
Oh yeah.
Like massive. People living by that code, and you go, oh, I got into conferences like Comic Cons and stuff, and you meet these fans of the show, of those films, fans of those films that are so, that they live their lives through those kind of moral codes of those films, and they're amazing people who feel safe in that world.
Yeah.
And that was an eye opener to me as well. And it's that thing where you go, Marvel is also it's a huge commercial enterprise. Their merchandising is a huge thing, and you go, yes, but the fundamental product of that, or the fundamental creation, is this drama, and is using real proper artists, writers, designers, directors, great actors. So all that stuff that's around it is only a byproduct of a really, really smart piece of artistry that again you get to watch close up when you're working on it, and people who are concerned with proper drama.
Yeah, I mean, it's got I've got 3 lads, like 16, 14, and 12, and they've kind of grown up with with this kind of universe. But I mean, most of our drives down to Spittle for holidays, the back of the car would be ordering your favorite Marvel movie, and like huge conversations about why, and I think that's, I mean, for I suppose for their generation, it was the Harry Potter, it is that kind of and come here to me, and I won't keep it for much longer, but to kind of go from, I mean, so I was happened to be over to see Connor McPherson's Girl from the North Country, and I got to see the birthday party at the same time. But like, having been in the midst of a rake of kind of filming, including the big Marvel movies, to have done, The Plough and then the birthday party. Really, the birthday party, I mean, as further away from Marvel could you get? That must have been great to be kind of anchored back into that.
It was, and at the same time, as with a lot of Pinter, those plays are such a head melter. Technically a head melter to learn, very hard to learn, but brilliant because you've got to be, language is so important in these plays that you've got to be so exacting and disciplined. But that play in particular, I think, like 5 months, I think.
Wow.
It was just by the end, just really, I felt tough because it's about psychological torture and physical torture, and after a while it took its toll. But I think that's why actors are amazing. Their ability to have that discipline to do 8 shows a week after week for months, and deliver at the same level every night. I find that takes such discipline, takes such commitment, but we had an amazing time. It's so funny, you know, watching Pinter plays and going, what is Pinter performance and what is Pinter acting? And I'd seen a lot of Pinter before, but I was thinking, I won't be able to do that. I don't know what is required. And so I worked with Ian Rickson, who has done a lot. He was very close to Pinter and has done a lot of Pinter productions. And he's a master interpreting Pinter. And so working with him was, again, another lesson, huge lesson in how to be in Pinter's language and his plays. And he's talking about language as weapons, words as weapons, sprung language. And so, again, working with someone who is highly disciplined himself and is, again, like David Laveau. I worked with David Laveau on Three Sisters in the Abbey in the 80s. And he was kind of saying, look, you can't rock up and do these plays every night. You can't just turn up and do this play. You got to unleash that play every single night. And you have a responsibility as an actor, paying public, especially the West End, but everywhere, but in the West End, they're paying like such high prices to come and see you. You owe them at the very least everything you've got. And so it's a privilege to be in those plays and a privilege to work and say those lines and work with those writers and those performers. So you have a responsibility to deliver every night. And I think one of the great things about theatre is that if you have a bad night or an off night or you come off stage feeling you've been less than you could be, that you get to go back and try again and scale it again and make sure you're being at your very best. And that takes discipline.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And it's funny, you kind of seem, even at this juncture, surprised by the fact that you're able to do it for that long. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a fresh surprise to you.
Yeah, and I think that, again, renewing your contract, like why you're an actor, why you're in this profession, why you're in this art form, always learning and growing and learning from new writers and new directors and actors. That renewal is just so important that you don't become complacent or you don't become boring and you don't become hackneyed.
Yeah.
And I think longevity in this art form is about renewal and is about redefining why you're an actor and asking yourself why you're an actor and asking what have you got to contribute and what have you got to say and about being a collaborator. Being a collaborator and learning all the time. I think that has to be fundamental.
And to come to the present day, as I said at the beginning, you know, recent award-winning digital award-winning, but after doing, like, say, Dublin Murders a couple of years ago, which, you know, allowed you flex a different muscle there, but certainly in Rialto, which is a stunning piece of work. It's really Mark's stunning writer and the whole, it's beautifully shot. But the performance, I suppose I just felt I hadn't seen you like that before.
Yeah, I have played a lot of front-footed alphas, sociopaths, psychopaths, extroverts, and high tempo. And so he's totally the opposite man who's invisible, low tempo, self-hating, introverted. And so, again, to be able to go to the other extreme, to paint with a different palette and go to play different notes, was an enormous privilege. And again, it's like being back at drama school, where you get one job where you're playing an operatic, character, and then you get to play this man who's totally different, and you get to play a character who's totally different, and he's being stretched in that way as an actor is just such a joy, and what you want, hopefully, what you aim for. That's the aim.
I mean, it's an extraordinary movie, which is still available to watch if you can buy it. I'll put the details in the comments. But I suppose what I loved about the performance and the film, and particularly the performance and the character that you made, is that he can't do anything. He can't fulfill himself at all, you know. And there's a moment, you know, where the vulnerability that he shows, that he's kind of looking for ways out of his not necessarily his life, but just ways out of his kind of personality through the whole thing.
Yeah, and he's trying to figure out who he is and what he was and what he wants to be, and I suppose that's true of all of us to some degree. We're still on the journey of discovery, but he's in this terrible place of grief and of lack of self-knowledge, and his life is kind of blown open by his father dying, and then him taking this step with this young prostitute, and his life explodes.
Yeah.
And so there's so much said in that part. There's so many layers. There's so much for him to discover in his journey, that again, you go as an actor to have that part. Again, I remember reading it in one sitting and going, I just have to do this.
Yeah.
Again, because I don't come along all the time, and also it's a huge responsibility, right? I mean, he's in every scene, he's almost in every frame, and you're trusted with this part by Mark, and you go, I've got to do everything I can to deliver it. And again, it's not one to come away feeling like you haven't done everything you could to find the truth.
Yeah. Come here, Tom, I'm going to leave you and say thanks so much for kind of taking part and taking time out of your, what's coming next for you? Or there's stuff that's kind of...
I'm doing a BBC film about Iraq in the kind of 2004. So I'm doing that in a few weeks, COVID allowing.
Yeah.
So that's there. I hope it's going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see. So that's what's next. Was, you know.
Yeah. We're all living in that space of kind of going. You wake up in the morning, forget that it's COVID's there, then it comes back.
Absolutely. And
then you kind of reach a new sense of reality by lunchtime. You know, so it's kind of.
But I think, you know, what's amazing especially because theatre is having the hardest time in our industries, or creative, one of the hardest times in the creative arts. But I think, you know, theatre has endured for thousands of years, and will always find a way. We'll always find a way, and has endured through pandemics and earthquakes and political tyrants and social upheaval. People always find a way.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, I think, what the work is going to come out of, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
And ingenuity and flexibility, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
The writer, they did one of these chit chats with the writer Michael West, and he said, like, you know, we're like cockroaches.
Yeah, that's such a good point. We are. We'll find a way.
Yeah. Brilliant, Tom. Thanks very, very much for taking part, and good luck with the rest of lockdown, and good luck with the rest of hopefully not too long COVID. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Tom, that's great.
Thanks,
man. But basically that'll probably be going out in a week or so. I'm probably going to announce it this week. But are you happy to let it go? Nothing there. You're all right.
Yeah. Once you don't mind my son running.
Oh no, it's brilliant. Oh God, no, Jesus, no. Listen, I'll chat to you the next time you're over, sir. Go on. Thanks a million.
Take care. That's the problem.